Ms. Mentor wants to speak.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Mentor?
Chair, before tea break, I was trying to clarify myself. And I would like to bring it to your attention that I maintain that when Mr. Mtolo first came to my house, the first visit, he was in the company of somebody else. That I asked him who that person was. He said he was a cyber specialist. And it is in that meeting where the typed statement he brought had errors. I corrected by pen. And it is in that meeting where that person was also present, where I was encouraged to remove the name of the president there. I think it's paragraph 61 if I'm not wrong. And that it is again, it was at the time when he was going on annual leave. And it is at the time when he was with that person, when he would return after annual leave. And I would submit that he never returned. He only returned after I had gone to the IPIT. And when he returned after the IPIT, he came alone. And that thereafter we never met. We arranged to meet, me and himself, and Advocate Fochel. The meeting never materialized. We postponed it to January 2017. It never materialized, and I never ever met him again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So you met Mr. Mtolo on 2 occasions. On both occasions, it was in your house. On the first occasion, he was in the company of somebody else.
Yes,
that he said was a cyber specialist.
Yes, Chair.
On the second occasion, he was alone.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That takes care of the clarification question that I was supposed to put to her. Ms. Mentor provided the clarifications before I posed the question. Chair, I'm advised that Ms. Mentor spent the tea break working through the PP's transcript to find the reference to the they that she spoke about when the corrupted statement, quote unquote, was brought to her. When she began her testimony before you, she indicated that there were some corrections she wanted to effect to her statement, and she couldn't immediately deal with all of them. And I was reminded that the statement was accepted, and she confirmed it subject to the minor corrections she'd like made. She had hoped to use the tea break to go through her statement to make sure she's effected all corrections, and she wasn't able to do so. So if we could permit her, upon her return, when she then deals with the versions of the former president and Mr. Ajay Gupta, should they be filed by the deadline, which is Friday, that she shall deal with the corrections at that juncture. And to remind that the correction at 122, her report to IPED, is still subject to receipt of the statement that she had made to IPED.
Okay, that's in order, yes.
Thank you. On that basis, Ms. Mentor, that would bring me to the end of your statement, and I would like to inquire from you whether we have covered everything that you wanted to inform the chair of in this session, and if we have omitted anything, please point it out.
I think we have not omitted anything, and if I may address the chair, my family expresses gratefulness to the commission and to the chair in particular, and the staff of the commission for making me safe yesterday, and for making it possible that I could take the stand today in a composed manner. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mentor, and we thank you too for coming forward to tell the commission what you know that's connected with the investigation of the commission. We have encouraged members of the public who may have knowledge and information of matters that fall within the terms of reference of the commission, and we continue to encourage them to come forward because there must be, there may well be others who know something that is relevant to our investigation, and some of them may be in the legislatures, in the provinces, in the national parliament, some may well be in the cabinet. We encourage all of them, if they have knowledge of anything that falls within our terms of reference, to come forward and assist the commission and therefore assist the nation. So we thank you very much for coming forward. You will still be needed at some stage, but the commission will be in touch with you. Thank you very much. You are excused for now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, I understand that the next witness and the team are ready. May I perhaps request, can I request a 5 minutes adjournment to possibly allow for a change of guard?
Okay, that's fine. Then we'll adjourn for 5 minutes, which will take us to 12:15.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
All rise.
Mr. Maleka, are you ready?
Thank you, Chairperson. Each time I stand before you, I tremble. I hope that
I don't
today-
see any trembling in your legs.
Chairperson, the next witness for the Commission is Mr. Maseko. May I ask for your permission to invite your registrar to swear him in?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Maseko.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Thank you. You will be, an oath will be administered to you just now, or if you don't do an oath, an affirmation will do. The registrar will take care of that.
Please state your full names for the record.
Themba Maseko.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
I do not.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the evidence you shall give today shall be the truth,
I
the whole
swear.
truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do swear.
So help you God?
Help me, God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of keeping the numbers, that we are at the stage where we can request you to mark it and admit it as Exhibit E1. We have placed a copy thereof before Mr. Maseko,
Yes.
and he has had an opportunity to consider the contents of Exhibit E1.
Yes.
So to remind you, Mr. Maseko, that each time I ask you to consider, reflect upon and deal with the contents of that bundle of document, I will identify it as Exhibit E1 to maintain the consistency of a clean public record. If I do forget, please forgive me, but you can correct me.
Thank you, sir.
Chair, the next data set is something that we don't place before you, but simply to record that it is a document comprising, amongst others, notices given to and served on persons and or entities implicated by Mr. Maseko's evidence. They know themselves, I'm not going to repeat them.
Yeah.
I know that some of them are represented here today. I raise this issue with you now because at this stage, as evidence leaders, we do not have a countervailing or competing version that disputes that of Mr. Maseko, so that there is nothing in fairness that we can put to him in order to comment as a competing version for you to arrive at the truth. Hopefully by Friday, we shall have, hopefully I emphasize, a competing version, in which event it may become necessary to recall Mr. Maseko in the event we complete his evidence before the version arrives.
Yeah.
Chair, against the background of that data set, can I identify where Mr. Maseko's evidence fits in the context
Yes.
of the terms of reference? His evidence fits in the context of paragraph 1.1 of the terms of reference, and that is a preamble which requires you to investigate, make findings on, report and make recommendation on allegations of state capture, corruption, or fraud, insofar as they relate to office bearers in public institution. The evidence of Mr. Maseko will deal with that part of the allegations.
Okay.
That evidence also fits in by way of an introductory portion to paragraph 1.6 of the terms of reference, which implicate irregularities, undue enrichment, or undue corruption, or influence in awarding contracts, mining licenses, government advertising in the Gupta-centric media businesses. And so there will be some evidence that implicates that part of the terms of reference. His evidence tells a story, and it's a story that relates to a public institution called Government Communication and Information Systems. I will ask for your permission in advance to refer to that institution as GCIS, because that acronym flows easily from my lips. And it's a story of the GCIS that we will tell in three parts. The first is that through the evidence of Mr. Maseko. And the second part will be the story of GCIS, which will be told by the current acting Director General, Ms. Pumla Williams, who will lay out before you allegations relating to those terms of reference of her experience after Mr. Maseko left GCIS. The third part of that story will relate to the numbers game, as we call it. It will be the amount of payments that the government, either directly through the GCIS or indirectly through other institutions, that have paid to the media entities owned by the Gupta-based media groups. To that extent, we will present that evidence through a representative of Treasury. And we consider that evidence to be neutral, for it does not implicate anyone. It simply presents before you the amount of payment made. And to that extent, we have not given any notice to any person, because it is evidence of numbers that is neutral in its nature. So, Chair, if you permit me, I would then begin to lead the evidence of Mr. Maseko. Let me mention that he is legally represented. In chambers, we introduced the set of lawyers that represent him. But in the interest of public accountability, may I invite Mr. Bam to introduce his team and tell you where he fits in.
Yeah, that's in order.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, my name is Azar Bam. To my right is Advocate Yanela Nkloko. We appeared together for Mr. Maseko. To my left is our instructing attorney, Mr. Tyrone Maseko.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Maseko, I have identified Exhibit E1 for you. I hope that you have it.
I have it, sir. Thank you.
I would like to explore a matter of sequence in relation to some documents contained in Exhibit E1. You will see that the first page, which is titled Maseko-Evidence Bundle Index, comprises a description of numbers sequentially set out on the extreme left-hand column. The next column that follows in the middle describes the contents of the documents contained in that bundle. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And the right-hand column describes the pages where each of the documents would be found. Do you see that?
I do.
And so, for instance, if you follow that index page, item 1 will be a curriculum vitae, which I take is your curriculum vitae, correct?
Yes, it is correct.
And you will see that the index page identifies where we will get it. It's page 1 to 5. Do you see that?
I see that, Chairperson.
And so that's a sequence which will follow. I'll come back to your CV. I'd like to identify some documents and ask you to comment about the sequence in Exhibit E1. Can I start off with the document which is at page 65? Going to page 74. Do you have it?
I've got it, Chairperson.
You have read that document before you took the witness stands. What is that document?
This is a document that I prepared following a statement that was made by the Secretary General of the African National Congress, inviting members of the African National Congress and members of the public who had information about the whole state capture allegations that were in the media. He then invited members of the public to make submissions to the African National Congress because following a meeting of their National Executive Committee, they had set up a structure, a committee, which was supposed to investigate state capture, and he was inviting people to come and give evidence. So that document was prepared as part of my submission to that process.
Can I, for the benefit of the chairperson, and of course for my own benefit too, ask you to identify the particular person at that point in time who held the office of the Secretary General of the ANC?
Chairperson, the person who held that position in the ANC was Mr. Gwede Montashe.
I have looked at the document, and you two no doubt did, especially page 74. Can I invite you to go to page 74?
Okay.
Are you there?
Yes, I am there.
My copy does not have a date, although it has a column for date entry. Does your copy have a date?
The copy does not have a date as well.
I see that there is a space for your name and signature. Mine does not bear any signature purporting to be yours or which in fact is yours. Does yours have a signature?
My copy does not have a signature as well, Chairperson.
The format of the document that you submitted to Mr. Montashe, did it have a signature and or a date?
The copy that I handed over to the Secretary General was signed and did have a date.
Can you recall offhand, more or less, when you would have signed a copy that you sent to Mr. Montashe?
Chairperson, unfortunately, I cannot recall the exact date, but I know that it was in the period between the months of June and July 2016.
Right. We will work with that period.
I'm sorry, Mr. Maleka. I think I understand that if you keep your mic on, it won't disturb anything.
Oh.
If it does disturb, somebody will say. So,
Okay.
because otherwise you might forget to put it on.
My
Thank you.
apologies, Chair. Thank you.
All right. You are comfortable that we will work with the period that you've just identified?
Yes, I am comfortable.
The next document begins at page 75. Can I invite you to go to page 75?
I got it, Chairperson.
Again, I take it that you've read that document.
Yes, I did.
Can you identify it to the chairperson?
Chairperson, this was a statement which was prepared by a group of former director generals, that is heads of departments, who were no longer in service of the public service. who had come together to discuss all allegations about state capture and their concerns about what was happening in the country at the time. So this was a media statement that was issued following a document that had been prepared and submitted to government, raising specific concerns about state capture.
You will see that at page 79, the document is referencing Annexure A. Do you see that?
I see that, sir.
And below that reference, there is the following description, and I quote, "A voice of reason. Save the soul of the public service from state capture." Do you recall who put that inscription in the document? Who scripted in those words in this document?
If I recall, Chairperson, the words were inserted by us as former DGs to try and capture what was the driving force behind this whole initiative.
Why did you, well, let me first clear the question of dates. I'm sorry, I'm going to jump up and about, but please keep page 79 next to you and move back to page 75.
Okay.
You will see that the title of the document is embargoed for
Yes.
publication on 15 May 2016.
I see that, Chairperson.
Why was the document embargoed for publication?
It was embargoed because the original memorandum was prepared by the Directors General. We then sent a copy to the media to make sure that the statement was not published before we had had some conversation with the ministers concerned that we had written to.
I'm sorry, Mr. Malega. What was the idea that it was embargoed until Sunday 15 May, or was it embargoed from 16 May,
It was
or 15 May, I'm sorry?
It was given to media houses most probably around the 13th and 14th of May for publication on the 15th of May.
Or the embargo would be lifted on the 15th?
Yes, it would be lifted on the
Okay, so it was meant to be embargoed before the 15th?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So the media house would not, on your permission, be entitled to publish it in advance of the 15th of May?
The general rule, Chairperson, in the media is that media houses tend to respect a statement that's written embargoed. They'll have access to it. And as far as I am aware, media houses have behaved in this regard, yes.
Thank you for that enlightenment. I will embargo what I sent to them in advance too. But on a serious note, if you go back to page 79, there is reference to Annexure A. What is the document, if ever it is a document?
The Annexure A would have been the document that was attached to the media statement, which was a memorandum, which was signed by the Directors General who had attached their signatures to the statement that we're making.
Yes.
So that memorandum is marked page 80.
Page 80.
Yes.
Right. You will see that page 80 is dated the 22nd of April, 2016.
Yes.
And that is, and we must read it as Annexure A, which is referred to on page 79.
That's correct, yes.
I will get back to the addressees of that document, but let me ask you to go to page 81. And you will see that in the concluding part, it identifies persons who are supposed to be signatories to that memorandum.
That's correct, Chairperson.
I have looked at these signatories. They are high-ranking members of a society.
That is correct, Chairperson.
They include, amongst others, Reverend Frank Chikane.
Yes, sir.
We know his background. Is there anything about his background that you want to share with the chairperson so that he has it on record? And when he makes determination, he should know who he is.
Chairperson, Reverend Frank Chikane was the Director General in the President's office during President Mbeki's time. He's a respected member of society, is somebody I held in high regard. He was a leader of the United Democratic Front during the struggle days, and it's somebody who was also a member of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress at the time.
I'll mention the names quite quickly, and if there is any attribute of the names that you wish to highlight so that it's a matter of record, please do that. There is the name of Mr. Bergilda. Who was he?
Mr. Bergilda was a former DG of the Department of Home Affairs. He had also worked in the intelligence services in government. He was somebody that, he is somebody that I hold in high regard. He's currently working for the Mapungubwe Institute of Minstrel.
There is Mr. Kesogodan, I skipped that, and there is Mr. Tozigwanya. Who was he?
He was also a Director General of Department of Land Affairs, I believe.
Then there is Mr. Roger Jardine. Who was he?
Also a former Director General in the Department of Trade and Industry.
And there is your name, and we'll come back to your background in a moment. And Chair, I'm just going to deal with two last names. The next is the name that I pick up because I know it quite well, is that of Mr. Vusi Pikoli.
Yes, Chairperson Vusi Pikoli was the former National Director of Public Prosecutions.
And then there is the name of Xoliswa Sibeko. Do you see that?
I see that.
What was she doing at the time?
Oh, I'll have to try and remember that, but at this point in time, I think her role escapes me, but she was also a former Director General in one of the government departments.
All right, let's replace her name with that of Ms. Lindell Shope Mafole. Do you see that?
She was a former Director General in the Department of Communications.
Yes. Can I ask you to go back to page 80? We now know what that document is. It was addressed to a number of ministers, and the head and deputy of the national executive of our country. The first addressee is the Minister of Finance, Minister Pravin Gordhan, MP. Do you see that?
I see that.
Do you know whether he or his office received this memorandum?
Chairperson, I can confirm that his office, Minister Gordhan's office, did receive the memorandum, and in fact did communicate to the group that he was willing at some stage to have a meeting with the group.
Next is the Minister of Public Service and Administration, Minister Mwako Ramatlodi, MP.
I see that, Chairperson, He also acknowledged receipt of the memorandum. And in fact, in his case, Minister Ramatlhodi's case, his advisor, I think it was a certain Mr. Mofe, did make contact with us and said his minister was going to get back to us with a date for a meeting.
And then there is the President of the Republic of South Africa. You see that?
I see that.
Do you know who was the president as at the date of this memorandum?
At the date of this memorandum, the President of the Republic of South Africa was Mr. Jacob Zuma.
Do you know whether he received this memorandum?
His office did confirm receipt of the memorandum.
Then lastly, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, who occupied that office at that point in time? I mean, 22nd April 2016.
It was Mr. Kgalema Motlanthe, and his office did confirm receipt of the letter.
Yes. There are some aspects of this memorandum that I'd like to deal with, if you permit me, Chair.
I'm sorry. Did you say the Deputy President of South Africa was Mr. Motlanthe
Motlanthe, yes, Chairperson.
in 2016?
I believe it was, yes. Could be wrong.
Didn't we have an election in 2014 and there was a new Deputy President?
Can you reflect on
Do you
that?
want to reflect?
Let me reflect on the dates again, Chairperson. I think it was.
There was a general election in South Africa in 2014.
Yes.
Can I reflect? I think my memory is escaping me a little bit.
Okay,
But
you
we
can come
check
back to it in due course.
That's the first installment you owe to the chairperson. So, market installment number 1. Chair, with your permission, can I canvass aspects of this memorandum that I believe to be important? Mr. Maseko,
Thank you.
look at the first paragraph of that memorandum.
Yeah.
Can you read into the record what is said there?
I'm sorry, Mr. Maleka. This memorandum doesn't have a heading. In page 79, it's referred to as Annexure A. It might be convenient that we give it some name, whether we call it memorandum or Annexure A, so that it might be easier to identify it.
Yes.
Shall we just say Annexure A, maybe?
Yes,
Or
Chair.
what do you suggest?
Chair, can we refer to it as the documents describe it as Annexure A?
You want us to write all of that document described as Annexure A, or you want us to just say Annexure A?
Yes, Chair, I would prefer that it should be Annexure A to the press statement.
To the press statement starting at page 75.
Indeed.
So we'll say Annexure A to, just say to press statement, because it comes immediately after the press statement
Indeed.
and is referred to as Annexure A, so that should be enough. So we'll refer to it as Annexure A to the press statement.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. You got that, Mr. Maseko?
I got it, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, I take it that I have permission to canvass some of the contents of this Annexure A, which I consider to be relevant.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Maseko, I invited you to start by reading the first paragraph of Annexure A.
Annexure A, paragraph 1 reads as follows, Chairperson. We, the undersigned, are former directors general in the post-apartheid South African government, with a prior history in the liberation struggle, where we served as cadres of Umkhonto weSizwe, officials of the African National Congress, Azanian People's Organization, the Pan-Africanist Congress, and various organizations of the mass democratic movement.
Can I stop you there and ask you to clarify the following for me? Why was the signatory to this document confined to the former Directors General of the public service of the post-apartheid era?
Chairperson, we were a generation of activists who had participated in the struggle for the liberation of this country. We went into government to serve the people. We shared a common commitment to democracy, ethical governance transformation. We also shared a very close comradeship among ourselves. We were in contact discussing our concerns about what was happening in government at the time. There was never an intention to exclude anybody, but it was because we knew each other very well. We shared a common vision, and that is why we decided to come together. There was a time when the number of DGs who signed the document could have increased to include other individuals who may not have been part of those organizations. But in the interest of time, we decided to proceed with those who had already indicated their willingness to sign the document.
I will skip the paragraph that follow, but ask you to confirm whether or not that is part of the memorandum. Do you confirm that?
Please repeat the question.
I don't want you to read it. Look at paragraph, the paragraph that follows.
Oh, the next paragraph.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the one thereafter, which starts with in pursuit. And the only comment I'd like you to make is to invite you that to confirm that that is part and parcel of what you communicated.
I do confirm that, Chairperson.
And the next one that I'd like you to read into the record is the one that starts with "we submit." Do you see that?
I see that, Chairperson. The paragraph reads as follows. We submit this memorandum to express our collective concern at recent revelations of state capture by the Gupta family, their apparent influence over political and administrative appointments, and their involvement in the irregular facilitation, securing, and issuing of government tenders and contracts. We also express our concern at the effect of the recent Constitutional Court judgment in the Nkandla matter on the legitimacy of the state and its ability to focus resources and efforts on delivering services to our people, growing the economy, and achieving our transformatory and developmental goals.
Mr. Maseko, that's a mouthful.
I believe it is, yes.
Can I invite you, just at the general high level, to indicate to the chairperson what were the matters of collective concern at that point in time relating to the Gupta family that caused you to submit this memorandum to those members of the National Executive you identified at a very high level of generality. We will come back to specific matters relating to you concerning the Gupta family.
Chairperson, as I recall, at the time, there were a lot of media reports about incidents of corruption, incidents of the involvement of the Gupta family in trying to unduly influence procurement decisions in government, influence appointments in national departments, state-owned enterprises, and some of the individuals, without referring to any specific names, some of the individuals that agreed to sign this memorandum were also able to share with the group their own experiences with the Gupta family. I might add, Chairperson, that at that particular point in time, there were also very clear indications that, in fact, a number of senior government officials who were still in the service were complaining to some of the people who signed this memorandum about the extent to which procurement processes in government were being undermined, and that they found themselves in a very difficult position because when procurement processes are not being followed, they as accounting officers could be held accountable for that, and yet they were experiencing undue pressure even from their political principals. However, many of those individuals were reluctant to attach their names to this document for fear of losing their jobs, for fear of reprisals. So that's basically what that paragraph was trying to capture.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Maseko, I'm going to move then to the next paragraph. I take it that you confirm that it's part and parcel of the memorandum that found its way to the ministers and the President and his deputy. But of interest in that paragraph, you refer to the initiative undertaken by the ANC to conduct an internal inquiry. Do you see that?
I see that, Chairperson.
Can I ask you to elaborate a bit about that internal inquiry, insofar as you recall it?
The discussion among Director Generals was that, firstly, we welcomed the fact that there were discussions within the African National Congress about this matter of state capture. We also believe that, yes, there were adequate measures that could enable decision makers in government to actually address some of the challenges that government was facing at the time, and that those needed to be attended to. For example, if a minister instructs a Director General to give a tender to a particular company that is illegal, unlawful, and contrary to, for example, the Public Financial Management Act. So those things are things that the group felt could be addressed using existing government processes and procedures. We were also mindful of the fact that the ANC process was essentially an ANC process, meaning that members of the African National Congress were welcome to participate. But if there was an employee of the state who was not a member of the African National Congress, there was no obligation for them to participate in an ANC, if so to speak, internal process. So our view was that if we wanted to get to the bottom of this state capture challenge, we needed to go beyond just a political party internal process. It needed to be broader.
Did you yourself participate in that ANC inquiry?
When the Chairperson, when the Secretary General issued a statement following a meeting of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, inviting, I believe he said, members of the ANC and members of the public to come and make representations if they've had experiences with the state capture project. So when I saw that invitation, I decided to participate in that process. And I know that people that I was associated with at the time, friends and comrades, thought I was being extremely naive to think that that process was going to yield anything. But personally, I felt that the matter was so serious that it needed to be dealt with, first politically, but also through your normal state security agencies, prosecutions, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to give that process a chance. Short answer to your question, sir, yes, I did
You
participate.
did, and how?
I made contact with the Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Gwede Matanshe, and informed him that I was willing to be a participant in the process. He then invited me to a meeting to discuss what I wanted to share with him. And the meeting did take place at his offices in Luthuli House. At the end of that meeting, he asked me if I was willing to put all the things that I told him in writing, and I responded in the affirmative, and that led to me preparing a statement, which I then hand-delivered to him at a subsequent meeting I had with him.
And is that the statement we find from page 65? Or is that a different statement?
Chairperson, that's correct. That is the statement I submitted to the Secretary General.
Yes. There's something that strikes me about the date sequence with reference to that statement. Earlier on, you indicated that although you can't pin down a date of that statement because you don't have the original, you said that it must have been somewhere between June and July 2016.
Chairperson, I need to explain the date issue. I've spent the past couple of nights trying to go through my diary to look for the specific dates for the meeting. I could not find it. And I believe the reason why it does not appear in any of my diaries was because of the climate at the time. I considered that meeting to be a private, confidential, almost secret meeting. So that's why I cannot confirm the exact date.
But as a matter of fairness and logic, and fairness to you, by the way, it is if by the 22nd of April 2016, you had already noted the internal ANC processes, and you have now told the chairperson that you had, by that stage, already participated by sending your written submission beginning at 65, it must logically follow that your memorandum must precede Annexure A to the press statement. Can I invite you to comment on that proposition I put to you?
Chairperson, as far as I can remember, if I can just check the dates, I think by the time we met as Directors General, I had already prepared that statement to the Secretary General.
Yes. Then, last paragraph on page 80, you now call for the establishment of an independent public inquiry in terms of section 4.1a of the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, and by chapters 10 institution and so on. It's a matter of public knowledge that the only public inquiry beyond the public protector's processes is the present inquiry.
That is correct, Chairperson. That's what we had in mind.
Mr. Maseko, I'm going to move away from this document unless there is any other issue arising from this document that you would wish to bring our attention to.
Not at this stage, Chairperson.
Are you sure? Can I ask you to look at page 81?
Page 81, let me go
The
through it again.
penultimate paragraph.
That is correct, Chairperson. I responded the way I did because it is my view that almost everything that's contained in that statement is of absolute importance. But it is important for especially people who may not have seen this document to actually state that, to read that final paragraph. With your permission, Council.
Yes.
We call upon the Minister of the Public Service and Administration to create an enabling environment to allow all public servants to act in terms of the existing prescripts and to freely come forward to provide information to the public inquiry, as well as to report any breaches of the relevant legislation, regulations, and codes of conduct. So you could say this was a call to action by the Forum of Directors General.
Yes. And what you presage in that regard is the concern that the chairperson has publicly noted at the commencement of this inquiry. Are you able, as you sit here in the witness box, are you able to indicate to us persons, whether you do it confidentially, who you believe have information that can assist the Commission?
Chairperson, I am convinced that there are a number of senior public servants, middle managers, who have had experiences with a number of individuals, including the Gupta family, but it could also be pertaining to the conduct and behavior of their political bosses, ministers and MECs and premiers, who could be willing to, who have information, who may be willing to give that information to your commission. But it is my honest view that the reason why they may not be able to come through is because of fear of reprisals, loss of jobs, and generally the country's maybe unwillingness or inability to support those who are willing to come forward and give information. So I may not be able to give you names as we're sitting here, but even in the process leading to the drafting of this memorandum by Directors General, a number of serving DGs had come forward. Some of the DGs were included in that memorandum also did have their own experiences, be it with the Gupta family or the conduct of their political principals. And the idea was that at the end of this memorandum, we were going to be able to encourage more and more people to come forward and tell their stories. But unfortunately, we found ourselves in the situation that you, Chairperson, find yourself in. Very few people were willing to come forward and speak out.
Yes. And, but I would imagine that any one of those former Directors General who were happy to be signatories to that memorandum, I would imagine that any one of them who was involved in that memorandum and who may have had experiences, that they would be the type of people who would be prepared to come forward.
Chairperson, my
What's
view...
your view of that?
Yes. Sorry to interrupt you, Chairperson. My view is that a lot of them were willing to come forth if the response to our memorandum was positive and a certain Zondo Commission or some other commission was established at the time, it would have been possible for some of them to come forward.
Yeah.
But because there was no action, I think that the issue just, in a way, faded away.
Because I'm thinking that your and their conduct in putting together that memorandum suggests that they are people of courage, and they were prepared at that time to take a certain stand, which might not have been popular politically in terms of government, and maybe if they were prepared at that stage, if there was a Zondo commission that was established immediately, maybe they might be prepared now, and maybe they might just need a little bit of encouragement and so on.
I certainly, Chairperson, I certainly hope so, and I think that the political climate has somewhat changed. I think that there may just be a willingness to speak. We must recall that at the time, there was plenty evidence that those who had spoken against certain practices that were starting to emerge in government were, so to speak, dealt with and left the service. At the time, for example, one of the issues we spoke about in that forum of Directors General was the fact that there was, just one example, Council, a case of heads of intelligence services who had written a report expressing their concerns about the significant influence that the Gupta family seems to be having. And I believe they might have used the phrase, the Gupta family may become a security risk or an intelligence risk for the country. I can't recall what exactly terms they used, but I believe there's a document to that effect. What we saw was what I may call an unprecedented move, where all of the heads of intelligence services were removed from their positions. So I think that there could be lots of evidence presented to show that those who spoke at the time ended up losing their jobs. But I think that if we fast track to today, I don't know how the call could be made. I think that more and more people may be willing to share their experiences.
No, thank you very much. The legal team and the investigators obviously are hearing, and I would like that serious efforts be made to see if some of those former directors general could be contacted, because by virtue of the positions they have held, a lot of them could be knowing a lot of information that is relevant for this commission. And the country does need that information. And if they could come up and have the courage to be signatories to the memorandum that we are talking about, I don't see any reason why they would not be able to rise to the occasion now. So the legal team and the investigators will take note, and thank you very much for that information, Mr. Maseko.
I must add, Chairperson, that I may just lose one or two friends, but you're welcome.
Mr. Maseko, you were prescient in the last paragraph of your memorandum. We will appeal through your lawyers to give us such information and names as you can have. Chair, I see that it is 1:10. I may have undertaken undue liberties. Is this the convenient time to break?
No, that's fine. I think let's take the lunch break. It's 14 minutes past 1 on my watch. Let's resume at 2:15. Thank you. We'll adjourn.
All rise.